Let me show you more details on how routing works. I won't be running the application to show you that, but I want to walk you through some theory. You can see when it comes to routing in MVC application, we have controllers and we have actions. Before we explore the routing, let me walk you through the main components of an MVC application, which is models, views, and controller. Let me switch back to the presentation and give you a brief overview. Now, if you remember, we had three folders for models, views, and controllers, and that is what MVC stands for. The first thing in MVC is model, which represents shape of the data. A class in C# is used to describe a model. The model component corresponds to all the data related logic that user works with. Let's say inside your application you have a table that stores all the category or all the product details. Then that product will be a model itself. Model basically represents all the data in your application. It can be a table that you are storing inside SQL Server, or it can be a model which will be a combination of multiple tables, and so on. This model can either represent the data that is being transferred between views and controllers, or any business-related data model that will represent all the tables of the database. So if you have 10 tables in your database, we will have at least 10 models that corresponds to them. There is also more complexity, but we will go into those details later on. Right now you can think of all the tables in your database will be a class file, which will be a model. Then all the properties of that class file will be the columns of the table. That is a simple relation that you can think of right now. Then we have view in an MVC, which is the user interface. View can be thought of HTML and CSS that you write to make things fancy and beautiful. Whatever you see on the website with your eyes is basically the view that is being displayed to you. But now you need to think of what happens if in a website you have a button and you click that button. What happens is that view will interact with your model to display some other data. But view does not interact directly with the models. For that we have something known as controller. Controller acts as an interface between model and view to process all the business logic and incoming request. So controller acts as an interface between model and view to process all the business logic, and it manipulates the data using model and interacts with the view to render the final output. This is just a brief overview of how model, views, and controller works. So let's say if a user clicks on a button, controller is the first thing that will receive that request. Then controller will have lots of action methods. Based on those action methods, controller will redirect this request to one of the action method, and controller will use the model. It will fetch all the data that it needs to display inside the view. Once the view is rendered, it will pass all of that to the controller, and controller will then pass a response which will be sent back, and the user will finally be able to see the page. So you can see controller can be treated as heart of your application. That is where we will have all the logic of your application, and it is the one which will be interacting with models and views. So with that in place, now you see that the request first comes to the controller and its action methods. So with that general idea, if we go back, you can see inside the map controller route, we have a pattern where we define a controller and an action method. So here we are saying that the default, if nothing is provided, it should go to the home controller and it should call the index action method. But that is a 10,000 feet overview. Let's take a look at routing little more with some theory.